Hello, everyone, and welcome to AskBR. It's been a while, and I just said let's talk about cinema because there are no new releases, and that's what we're going to do. So, the first question comes from Rajesh DJ, who asks the most profound question: what is cinema according to you? Is it just an entertainment, or it impacts your thoughts in any way? Can you imagine life without it? My answer to this would be I cannot imagine life without it, just like I cannot imagine life without books or something that is created in order to take me into a different world, right? I think more than entertainment, I would use the word engagement. I want to be engaged with the characters. I need not necessarily be entertained by them, in the sense that if you're watching a tragedy, for instance, I'm not being entertained, I'm not laughing, but I'm engaged. I want to be in that space. I want to be with those characters. I mean, I was just going through all the comments for Karthik Dials at the end yesterday, and it seems, people almost seem angry sometimes that how dare somebody call somebody else's wife this way and say things like ask her to say I love you and all that. But that kind of minor emotional infidelity, that zone, is what makes characters so fascinating, because nobody's either fully good or fully bad, right? We all have our gray zones. And when you go into such a movie and you see such a character, it kind of makes you think about people, about relationships, about things that are more than just the movie itself. So for me, cinema is something that takes me out of my world and puts me into some other world. And it could be even an escapist world like Marvel or, Superman or whatever it is. But that's what cinema is. It's kind of something that always takes me out of where I am, and that's why I think we should be so grateful that it exists at the time of COVID. Because imagine if it had been the earlier, like 2 centuries ago, when we would have had nothing to entertain us during lockdown period like this. So I think that's what cinema is. The next question comes from Mohan Ram, who asks this very interesting question: what is your Citizen Kane of Tamil cinema in terms of visual metaphors and all? I don't know. It's I would definitely, I don't know if I could point to one such movie, but definitely one such filmmaker, the earliest such filmmaker that comes to mind is Sridhar, and then K. Balchandar, and then Mani Ratnam, and all these people. They kind of try to do things visually. Maybe if you see like a Balchandar movie today, some of it may be a little overdone. But the point is that he was trying to do things without dialogue, without cinema. But if you ask me if any Tamil cinema has truly changed the grammar of cinema, visual grammar, I don't think so. I don't think that we have been trying to do. I don't think any Indian film, frankly, has done that. Influences have come from the West or from foreign films, and our directors have kind of adapted them and made them their own. But maybe you could point to something like Shubhrata Mitra, who's Satyajit Ray's cinematographer, doing bounce lighting, those kinds of inventions. But if any movie that kind of came out in India and showed a never before kind of thing, I don't know. I'll have to think really hard. Right now, nothing is coming to the top of my mind. Venkateshwaran says, what about Tamil cinema in comparison to foreign films? I don't know if we should compare, frankly, because our audience is different. Are you going to compare, Rasam Sadam and Pasta? No, right? It's just different. It's a different audience. It's a different feel. Why should one be like the other? In fact, one of the things I like about our films is the fact that they have a strong local flavor. Because if I want to see a Woody Allen film, I'll go and watch a Woody Allen film. I don't need to see a Hindi or a Tamil flavored Woody Allen film, because why do I want to see something with that feel when I can already get that feel outside, right? I just think that we should just treat them as two separate things. And about the acclaim part, that's an interesting question, because once you get to a level where our films are being shown at festivals, then they get a lot of acclaim. But again, you should note that when a Visarane goes and screens there, it is largely made in a cinematic language that they also understand, right? It is not, I'm not saying it's not local, it's very local, but it's also made in a language that is universal. So most of our films are not made in that language. So if I say I'm enjoying a mass movie, there's no reason to expect other people to enjoy it as well, because it's made for me. It's made for me in this particular state or belonging to this particular language speaking group with these sensibilities. So I think that's its own kind of fun, right? Rahul Tej asks, in the middle of all complex technicalities of filmmaking, can an artist stay close to his profound self-examination to put out a vision? Definitely, definitely yes, because there are many artists who, we tend to say that they're repeating the same thing over and over again. But that is what for some people is very fascinating, because their obsessions, they're obsessed with certain things. Hitchcock, for instance, because all his themes, almost all his films are about an innocent man on the run. Almost all, not everyone, but that's the theme that endlessly fascinated him. Crime, suspense, like somebody who's blamed for something that he did not do. The most classic example being North by Northwest. Through that, you get to know a lot about the filmmaker through these obsessions. You understand the sensibilities of the filmmaker, which is why you kind of use the word auteur, right? Because otherwise, if somebody's just making generic movies, it's of no interest at all. So I do think self-examination, Bergman's another example, I do think self-examination is possible in cinema, and I think a lot of people have done it. And to take again the example of Karthik Dials at the end, I do feel that there is a lot of Gautam zones inner self coming through the film, and the fact that he makes these love stories, these very sharp love stories that are very divisive, right? Because I love Neethane in Ponvasantham. I know a lot of people hate it because it's I don't know why they hate it, but I just really like that film very much, because it speaks a lot of things about relationships, about men and women, and in a way that general love stories don't. So maybe people don't like that discomfort that's there, but I'm saying that this is another way that a director can be very individualistic. Ashwin Murali Krishnan asks, how important is it for a filmmaker to be socially responsible? I think you guys know the answer to this question. I don't think filmmaking should be socially responsible at all. It is not a filmmaker's job to deliver messages. Filmmaker's job is to create movies, which I'm not saying that people, this is my opinion. I'm sure that there are people who believe, because there was one point when the films were such a big and powerful medium that the classic example being how the DMK used cinema for propaganda, right? Or how the Russians used cinema for propaganda. But at that point, cinema was the only real big visual medium, and it could only be seen on a big screen. So the power of it was something else. Today, when the size has shrunk more and more, you kind of feel that people have also begun to understand that what is happening on screen is a fakeness. It is not real. People are enacting them. So there's a certain distance that's happened over the years, over the decades, that people do not feel as close to it anymore. So I do think that if you want to deliver a strong message, an oration, you go to a stage, give a very strong speech, that's a message. If you go to if you write a very strong poem, if you write a very strong essay, that's a message. But when you're doing fiction, when you make a very strong documentary, that's a message. When you make fiction, though, your obligation is to take the characters through a convincing story. And if they're going to keep spouting messages throughout, then it takes you away from the story. So again, for me, that does not work. There may be some people who actually, there are lots of Tamil cinema viewers who say, படம் அவ்வளோ நல்லா இல்லை, ஆனால் நல்ல மெசேஜ் இருக்குது. So I mean, if you're okay with that, I guess that's something you can live with. Narendra Kumandan says, why is sci-fi least explored in Indian cinema? I would say it's simply because of the budgets and also because of the audience. Because see, sci-fi is a zone that is slightly complicated, because you're going into different planets and creating different things. So to create convincing special effects that make you believe in that's going to take a lot of time and money. But more than that, I think the genre itself, with its emphasis on ideas rather than story, I think that makes it a problem, because when you're talking about a mass audience, a large audience that mainly watches films for entertainment, They want songs, dances, things like that. It's very difficult to kind of go back to sci-fi and say, I'm going to thrust all these elements in. Though there have been, like there have been experiments like which have kind of worked. But even there, if you see, there's a very high quotient of comedy, which kind of makes it localizes the whole sci-fi aspect of it. Similarly, we don't need superhero movies because Rajnikant can beat up 10 people all by himself. It is something that we believe in. He doesn't have to be bitten by a radioactive spider. He doesn't have to be born Krypton and get powers by landing on Earth's gravity. All these things are unnecessary because we automatically assume that a mass hero means he can fight and nothing. So certain genres, I think, we have assimilated into our storytelling, even if it is not exactly the way Hollywood says it, right? Sai Krishna Ramavajula says, what is Malayalam cinema doing that other industries are not doing? Basically, they're saying good stories and they have created a clean distinction between writer and director. So the person who writes is very different from the person who directs, and I think that is why they are where they are. And I think all other industries should try to kind of take that distinction forward. I think that's what they're doing right. Ajit says, why are film festivals essential? See, essential is a word that need not be used with cinema at all. It is, at the end of the day, it is not an essential. You don't need it to live. But why are they nice to have around? Because they create conversation around movies that need the backing of cinephiles. See, if you release a big hero movie, then automatically the fact that there is the big hero takes care of all the publicity and things like that. People will automatically go to theaters or want to watch it or put it on the much to watch list. But when you kind of have a smaller film, you want to carefully curate it. You want to carefully nurture it so that it kind of creates word of mouth in by going and getting some awards and therefore bringing it out in a very controlled manner, so that anyway people are not going to watch it in masses, in droves, but at least the people who are interested in this kind of cinema get excited because it's been at Cannes or Berlin or something like that. And also, personally, I get a thrill when Indian films are shown in festivals outside, because it means that there are at least some people who are capable of taking our cinema outside, even though technically it may not be our cinema, as in not the cinema that is consumed by the masses here, but it's still our cinema and our stories from our lands and our regions and our people, about our people, and I think that's really great and that gives me a big thrill. Manjuluri Vaibhav asks, what is your opinion about the OTT platform? I think in India what's going to happen is a lot of the smaller releases are going to try for OTT, because you get more freedom, you get more money, and there is a guaranteed release. Unlike theaters where you have to wait for the big films to clear up space until you put your film out there, and even then you will get very odd shows. You might get a 1 o'clock show when everybody's in the office, you might get a 10 o'clock show when not many people may come. The prime shows, that is the afternoon and the evening shows, they will go mostly to the bigger movies. So I think slowly smaller filmmakers will start opting for OTT, also because there will come a point when people are going to say, I'm only going to see certain films in theaters because it takes a lot of effort. It takes me half an hour to go to the theater, it takes me half an hour to drive back, I have to manage the crowds, plus there is all that stuff that goes inside. I have to spend 15 minutes doing an interval, I have to put up with a lot of noise inside the theater, I have to all that is gone, because now I can watch a film at my leisure. But what is lost in that is that, see, when I try to watch a movie in OTT, I try to watch it continuously, right? I so that I get the movie as envisioned by the director. Now, if you watch half an hour and pause it, and then watch the next half an hour and pause it, then you're not watching the movie that the director wanted you to watch. You're watching it at your own pace. So it becomes a slightly different movie, because from the first installment that you watch to the second installment that you watch, a lot of stuff is happening in your life that is going to kind of you're not going to come back to that movie in that serialized space. So I think that is going to be something that I would like people to take care of the fact that this is something that happens. But what can you do? I think it becomes if that's the way that they want to see films, then you cannot stop that. But that is the one thing that I fear, that film watching will become episodic, and that will hurt the flow that the filmmaker wanted you to be with. In a theater, you cannot escape that flow because you have to see what is being projected in front of you. But at home, I think it changes a lot. So I hope people are aware of that fact. I am John asks what is the difference between Hollywood and Indian writing structures. It is just that Hollywood has what is called a three-act structure, something that I've never quite believed in, even though I believe in the overall, as an abstract principle, I believe that there are certain things that need to be done, put a person in a situation, all that kind of stuff that tells you. But most of the really interesting films have not followed this three-act structure, and I think we cannot even follow that to a large extent because we have an interval bang in the middle. So you have a pre-interval structure and a post-interval structure because you have to start the movie, finish on a mini climax at the interval, then start the movie all over again, and then finish at the end. So three-act structure won't work for you out here. Though there are definitely principles that help you, but most of the screenwriting books, I would say, if you are an aspiring writer and if you're going after those screenwriting books like Sid Field and all that, there are definitely some interesting things there, but don't use it as a Bible. Use movies as your Bible. Use the movies that influence you as your Bible, so that you can follow that rather than set of rules or set of things. Because art really is not something that you want to do following a set of rules. It kind of defeats the whole purpose because it kind of makes it an assembly line product, and I don't think that people want that. Why is it that Tamil cinema does not have a parallel cinema movement is one question that is being asked by Sachin Venkatram. And there's another question that is very similar. Sharath97 asks, you have often said that traditionally there has been no parallel cinema wave in Tamil cinema. Correct me if I'm wrong, but can't filmmakers like Mahendran, Balu Mahendra, Parthiban Cheran and etc. be considered parallel cinema filmmakers? No, because I think art cinema, actually it's a very confusing term because it makes you think that is art and the rest of it is not art. Actually, art is everywhere. But I think art cinema, the term came into existence because it is not mainstream. It is, maybe we should call it non-mainstream cinema, right? The movies that are not made for the masses. Even in that, there is an extreme. Like if you look at it, let's say a Shankar. Shankar is this extreme. There's Maniratnam. There's Balu Mahindra. And there is nobody here at this end who can be considered an Adur Gopalakrishnan. This is where we stop. This Balu Mahindra level or this Mahindran level is where we stop. We don't get to the Adur Gopalakrishnan level, the Mrinal Sen level, the Satyajit Ray level. There is nobody like that in Tamil cinema. There are one or two films like that, but John Abraham made Agraarathil Kadai. So there is there are one or two movies like that, but we don't have that at all. And I think that's because we have always, and I don't think Telugu cinema has it either, because there have been one or two people who've made such movies, but they don't really have consistent art cinema. And I think it's just a cultural thing, because I think because we like melodrama, we like a story being told rather than a certain abstractness. I think we want concrete stuff being happening. Like when I was a kid, and I watched Elipatayam on TV, I was like, what the hell is happening? It's like this guy is sitting there and fanning himself and there's nothing happening on screen. But then, when you grow up and you look at it through like a cinema lens, you understand that inertia is very much part of the film structure, right? So you start to look at it through different ways. But then when a person is going just for entertainment, who will want to spend time watching this? So I think that art cinema thing never caught on in Tamil cinema, and but I don't think we can consider Parthiban and all as art filmmakers, because their films have art, but they are still targeting they are still very mainstream kind of films, is what I'm trying to say. Arun Preeti Pillai has a very interesting question. I love watching old movies, especially Italian and Hollywood films from the 60s, 70s, but pre-KB Tamil movies do not hold my attention at all. They're very over the top. Actually, yeah, because see, the thing is, they are all melodramas, and I love those films because I love. I think it's just a question of being able to put yourself in the zone and watching those films, because they all have a strong story, strong relationships. The comedy is good. Even today, you watch a Kalyana Parisu, and it's like there's comedy, there's drama, there's love, there's everything. But I think what happens is when you've grown up with a modern sensibility and a certain pace of cinema and a certain way of watching cinema, when you go back to those kinds of films, maybe you're not able to make the switch. So I would say just sit down and watch those like for a period, right? Because it's like getting used to anything. Like let's say you're listening to film music all your life, but then suddenly you enter Carnatic music concert and somebody's singing like a half an hour alapana, right? You're going to tune out because you're like, what is happening? There are no words. There's just like somebody's just saying kind of thing. So what is happening? But if you train yourself to that mode, then you will definitely be able to get in there. So I think being able to get into that zone is a very important aspect, and I think you should try at least to get into that zone. Try watching Motra Sundaram Pillai, try watching Uyarnda Manidan, try watching Nenjilor Alayam, try watching Parthal Pasitirum, try watching Kudandayum Devamum. All these films, to various levels, they have their interesting aspects. Or try even watching slightly experimental movies like Kalai Koil. Or if you really want westernized kind of screenplays, try watching Andanal. So yeah, there's like lots of films there that might this thing, but the thing is, you can't just keep watching Netflix, suddenly go to Bhagapiri Vinay and say, oh, yo, this film is not working for me. That won't happen because, you have to watch like Netflix, old film, so that both those sensibilities run parallelly inside you. So it's just a question of developing a taste. Jagadish KG says, would love to hear your thoughts on Ozu. I love the guy. I love how formal he is in his filmmaking. Formal as in very, very strict adherence to form. I love how minimalistic he is, how he conveys so much. He's kind of the antithesis of Kurosawa, because Kurosawa is all about movement and dynamism, whereas Ozu is about stillness, and it's almost like you're exhaling when you're watching his films. The biggest of crises, like in Tokyo Story, for instance, they happen with such little fuss and with such a sense of acceptance. I really, really like it. I actually love Japanese culture that way, because they really, of course, I don't know Japanese culture. The only Japanese culture I know is through the movies. But I'm saying that there is such a sense of I don't know, equanimity. I'm not talking about the samurai films, right? The other ones, the Ozu films and things like that. There's such a sense of acceptance, of a sense of being bounded to a community more than one's personal self, and I'm always very touched by that, because I think as a people, as a world, as we grow increasingly self-centered, because we all have our own needs to look after, the needs of the people around us. I think this is a very, very emotional thing for me, and also I think I'm growing older, because I'm kind of getting into that zone where I'm looking for these kinds of things, rather than quick action fixes. Suryavarshini Sundar asks about cultural appropriation, which is a controversial issue in arts and literature. What are your views about it in cinema? I think it all depends on the product. I feel that anybody should be allowed to say anything in any way that they want, and not be forced to conform to any one particular narrative. But today, with social media being what it is, the narratives have become so confined that it's almost like you can tell one story only one particular way, or talk about gender only in one particular way, or talk about sexuality only in one particular way. So I think the issue of cultural appropriation has become highly tied with the issue of political correctness, and I think that's makes it a little difficult for filmmakers trying to do it. But then, personally feeling, I don't think that restriction should be there at all, in terms of any art form. So that's where I stand. Bhavani Shankar asks a very interesting question. How important is knowing the culture of the country while appreciating a foreign language movie? It is not, because see, the thing is, any language that is not your own language or your own culture, you are not going to be able to appreciate it beyond a certain point. Let's take even, I'm a Tamilian, I'm watching a Punjabi film. like I'm watching one of Gurvinder Singh's films, there is a certain level of cultural leap that I can make simply because it is still the same country, right? I'm still familiar with some of the politics and some of the other things that are happening there. But a Punjabi person with that context will watch the movie with much more depth and nuance than I ever will. So the point is this, that we should understand that we are all going to be watching a lot of movies as strangers to cultures. So that is why there is never one definitive opinion about a movie, right? Because we all bring, like the other baggage that we bring to films, culture is also one of them. So there are certain things that we will get, and that's okay. But the point is, does the movie work for you? I always feel that the important thing to do for a movie is see what you can get out of it. If you're really interested, go and read about the culture and then see culture. For example, if you're watching Battle of Algiers, right? Watch it as a movie and then watch it as, go read about what happened and then maybe watch the movie again. So that the first time you're watching it purely as a narrative, and then the second time you're watching it as a slightly more informed person. So that you kind of understand what it is if you're interested. But otherwise, the movie should still work for you. As in, you should not allow the fact that you don't know that culture or that particular incident thing, because the filmmaker's job is to tell the story to an audience. And if that story is not coming through because of any gaps, then I don't think you should beat yourself up too much about it, because you can just say, well, this movie didn't work for me for XYZ reasons. So Venkatar asks if there is any film or film related event that made you think I want to write about cinema, and if so, what is it that made you take the decision? I think it's just a question of discovering cinema writing at an early age, and because I always liked writing and I always loved cinema, and writing about films just seemed a way to fuse the two things together. And that's why even now when I'm doing a lot of videos, I keep trying to write at least 3 or 4 pieces a week, because I'm terrified that I will get to a point where I won't be able to write about mainstream cinema, or I'll get to this point where I'll say, oh, I'm only going to write about the important films. I'm not going to write about the regular films, because I'm like, I don't want to get to that point. I never want to lose the roots of what every kind of cinema is. So I think that's kind of what keeps me going as a critic as well. The Cinema Talkie asks, no other film industry uses songs for storytelling as much as Indian cinema does. Do you think that it gives uniqueness to our cinema, and if it is actually needed? I would say yeah, because it depends on whether the person knows how to use songs or not. A lot of people don't. That's why they come across as something that is shoehorned in. But there are many people who've used songs very well. For instance, how do you know Dhanush's excitement after a particular point in Adakalam? It's because he's dancing on the streets with moving his lungi around, and I think that feel, that level of I've lost myself, I'm crazy, I'm like, right now I'm beside myself, that can never be conveyed through a scene. That song, that extra energy, that taking it from the real plane to the hyper real plane, is what makes that moment what it is. So I think songs are very necessary, and they work well in the hands of people who use them well. But of late, I have found that not many people want to use songs, or they find that they are unable to use songs, or sometimes they simply cut off songs because they're adding to the running time, and people have become impatient watching long films, which is a sad thing, but then I guess you move with the times, right? Finally, Dr. CGS asks, how does a film critic watch a movie? How different it is from a regular movie buff? Dude, I am a movie buff. The reason I became a film critic is because I'm a movie buff. I love films, and it's just watching it with a certain heightened perception. So you're kind of aware of what is happening and how it is happening. That's all. It's like, it's a little training that you give yourself. Like anything, for example, if you've studied literature, when you read a book, you won't read it just for the story. You will also be reading subconsciously. Your mind will also be processing the style, the genre, what kind of, what Charlotte Bronte wrote like that, or Thackeray wrote like that, or whatever it is, Shakespeare, this is taken from Shakespeare, this quote is from there. You'll be making all these cross references even as you're reading. So I would say that that doesn't mean that you're not enjoying the story. It's just that you're enjoying the story with a heightened level of appreciation. So on that note, thank you so much for your questions, and I think we should do more Ask BRs. Actually, there was a suggestion that there should be an Ask BR dedicated entirely to Karthik Dials at the end. But then I said maybe not, because that's a short film, and I don't know if I want to tackle so many people asking me questions about emotional infidelity right now. So let's stay calm, stay safe, and see you soon in the next Ask BR. Meanwhile, keep watching Film Companion South.